Welcome to Did You Know? Podcast, your host, Richard Utley, dedicated to the African American viewers. The program is aimed to celebrate African American culture and deal with the real and relevant topics that impact the everyday lives of the African American community through frank and insightful dialogue with local and national influencers. Every day, there is another horrible, discouraging news story, directly or indirectly, impacting African Americans. But we need to look at the shining stars in the galaxy of Black America. It is time to tell our story.
Good evening, and good evening to another Did You Know? Well, I'm sure all of you know I have quite a few things to say this evening, but I'm not going to dwell on politics. I got some things to say about politics, and then I'm going to move on. You know, ever since I've had this program, I told everybody that one of my most important things is that I wanted us to talk about things that we did not know and things that we should know, but I've also talked about that we owe it to ourselves to develop our own direction. I've said so many times in our community, we keep waiting on someone to ride in our community on this horse and rescue us. We've always thought that. Well, I've been telling you, and guess what? We was in the community and we was waiting on that horse to come through, and guess what? That horse did not come through. My point is this tonight. We got to look out for ourselves. We have to develop what our agenda is. And if people don't follow our agenda for what we believe in, then we have to stop supporting them. I just think it's ironical. And people have asked me why I thought the roast went the way it went. Ladies and gentlemen, you may agree and you may not agree with me, but I'm going to plant a couple seeds in your mind. Why do I think the problem was? Well, it was a short campaign. There's no question about that. I'm going to throw some things out and you think about it. America got a problem. America got a gender problem. You just think about it. America got a race problem. Just think about it. And so what that tells me is that we need to own up, that we got some problems and we got some issues, and we got to figure out how to work through them. But the first thing that we have to do, we're going to have to join our ranks together. We done had this big tent party, and we invited everybody in. And guess what? We got stuck with the bill at the end of the party. I just want you to think about that. You know, Democrats mourn their 2024 losses nationally and trying to figure out what went wrong. And guess what? I'm reading already talking about who might run in 2028. I'm telling the Democratic Party this. Don't you assume anything anymore. And you're going to have to do your due diligence. And we want our own seat at the table. We want our own seat. I think we have done everything everybody's asked us to do. And so we're going to have to form our own agenda. Whether it's D, R, independent, or something else. We're going to have to craft and shape what we think is going to be good for us. You know, I laughed because this election is going to show a dark part in our history. You know, one of the things I'm saying, and I'm smiling, I said this all along. If you don't look out for your own interest and your vested interest, then shame on you. I'm reading all these things now as the Republican leaders look for ways to offset the cost of the new set of tax cuts. So if there's a tax cut, where's the money coming? Revenue to pay for government. Where do you think it's coming from? It's not coming from the high end. It's coming from you. So when they start talking about Medicare, 70, there's 70 million people on Medicare. Guess what, folks? You're in for a rude awakening. Those of you who just think government programs is just a law thing, and you just think it's a D or Republican or independent, it's about people. It's about people. And guess what? Them little food stamps and them work requirements is now all going to change. And guess what? The president-elect told you what he was going to do. He told you. But you didn't believe him. And God, now you're going to have to pay the reality of that. He told you he's going to do mass deportation. A lot of you said, well, maybe not how he's going to do it. He plans to use the military. But there's something else I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to give these words I want you to think about. National Emergency Declaration. You're going to hear that word more than you think. And if you think it's just for mass deportation, I hear you. Just put it in your mind. I was reading somewhere where some Arab Americans are concerned about Trump's pick. And they have a reaction. What are you concerned about? He told you who he's going to favor more. I thought you had a better chance with the Democrats, but apparently you felt you might have a better chance with Trump. You own it, you live it. Yep, Trump told you he's going to lower the grocery bills, and you bought it. First of all, I don't know how he's going to lower them, because the president really don't lower them. But you believe that. You believe that tariffs is going to be the way. Well, I'm going to leave you with this. My issue is this here. You were told what was going to happen, and you did not believe it was going to be you. So now we got to own it. And because we got to own it, we got to live with it. Mary, don't you weep. That's where we are at this point in time. I'm going to leave you with a couple quotes before I bring my guest on. Armed with the knowledge of our past, we can with confidence chart a course for our future, from Malcolm X. The other one is, nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity, from Martin Luther King. Here's my point, ladies and gentlemen. We got to know our history. We got to know our foundation. And once we know our history and once we know our foundation, then we will be able to figure out who we are, where we're going, and where we're trying to go. I have found in this last few months that so many of us don't know any history about us at all. And so I have made a decision that every time I have this program, we're going to do some history. But it's your responsibility to tell your kids. It's your responsibility to tell them how we came about, how we struggled, how we made it. Because we made it. But we got a long way to go. And now you're starting to see a lot of things, but I think that we can survive it, and we will survive it because we are survivors. But we need to teach each other how to love each other, how to care for each other, and how to support each other. Because guess what? I don't really think we're going to have a choice. That's how I see it today. And so I'm going to move on for politics and try to come up with something a little bit more easier to talk about today. So today I decided that I was going to bring somebody else on different. And so I said, I'm going to bring a coach on. And I've been a coach. I'm looking at some of my listeners. They've been coaches. So I brought a coach on today, and we're just going to talk about opportunities and experiences and balance from players to people to situations. So I have Coach Barry Risman. How are you, sir?
All right, very well. Thank you, Rich, for inviting me.
So tell my audience who you are.
Okay, I'm originally from Philadelphia, grew up in North Philly, born right on Broad Street. You can't be more Philly than that. Born and raised there, went to Central High School, which was it still is one of the magnet high schools. From Central High School, I went to Penn State, graduated from Penn State with a degree in political science. Left there, briefly went into insurance. I was a claims adjuster for a while, sold insurance for a while, and that really wasn't my path. So I didn't really like that. And having a conversation with my mother one time, she said, "Son, you explain things so well. Why don't you become a teacher? I mean, it seems like that's what you should do." And I followed her advice, like good sons should follow their mother's advice. And I went back to grad school, got all my teaching certification, and became a teacher. And then once I became a teacher, I kind of simultaneously got into coaching. So I look back at my past and I said, Richard, I've been coaching one sport or another for over 40 years now. So I'm currently the 8th grade coach at Central Dauphin here in this area, in the Harrisburg area. And I've done that for the last 8 years. I've also been the golf coach at Camp Hill High School, which is here locally near Harrisburg. I've also was the varsity coach at Camp Hill when I first arrived here in the Harrisburg area. And then prior to that, I lived in Virginia. I was coaching at Lake Braddock High School and also at Herndon High School. So yeah, it's been an interesting thing how those two subjects merged together in my life. That while you're coaching, you're teaching, and while you're teaching, you're coaching. So those two things always dovetail together for me.
What is something that impacted your life to know that this is really what you want to do? To develop minds, to teach people, and to know that you play a major role in their life?
It's kind of interesting. It's hard to point out a one circumstance, but it's actually kind of been my personality all along, and I didn't realize it, that I've always been that person that likes to find out about information and then share it. And you know, you can take that information for what it's worth, you can use it or not. But for me, that giving is what kind of motivated me, and my mother identified that maybe more so than I did, that I was born to this. We're in the church, so this was God's plan for me. And you know, once you find out what your plan is, everything goes from there. So I love what I'm doing. I love the influence that I have on young people, and I have the same influence on a lot of adults. So what truth I see, I try to pass on. And if somebody is dealing from a truth perspective, they're going to make better decisions. So I guess that's kind of how I felt about this thing the whole time.
I want to go back to your growing up first.
Sure.
And the reason I want to go back to your growing up is to show the audience, and tell my audience out there, you see, you can be what you want to be if you work at it or if you try at it. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And so my thing is, you grew up in Philadelphia. You grew up in a tough neighborhood?
Yes.
Tell us, you grew up,
Yeah.
But sometimes people
correct.
think that, you know, because you may be where you are, you might didn't grow up in a tough neighborhood.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in, well, if you're from Philly, you say North, North, North Philly. A little block called Vampel Street, where we had 60, 70 kids on that block, so we were always outside doing something. My parents were not wealthy. My mom worked in a textile factory. And maybe, Richard, that might be one of the experiences I'd have to share. So one summer, I worked in the textile factory with my mother. And I was what was called a bundle boy. And the bundle boy has to go around with this little wagon and take pieces of clothing from one sewing machine to the other. And then they work by piecework, so they have to go really fast, and then you have to pick up that bundle and run it somewhere else. So I'm working this job during the summer, and it is hot. You know, this is June, July in Philadelphia. So when you say sweatshop, literally when you walk in the front door, it is hot already, and you are sweating. And for them to make any money, they have to go through a lot of these things. So I was running around from one machine, and oddly enough, they don't put them in some kind of consecutive order. You have to go from one place to another, to another, to another. So I said, first, I really appreciated how hard my mother worked, because she does this every day. I'm only here for a couple months in the summer. And then it made me realize, hey, you know, I don't think I want to do this all my life. I've got to get a better education. I've got to do something to advance myself. My father worked for Atlantic Richfield, so he was what was called a filler, when they filled those big oil tanks and drove trucks around back and forth. So both of them immigrated. My father is originally from South Carolina, came off a farm and couldn't stand his grandfather, working for his grandfather anymore, so he had to move north. And my mother was originally from Virginia. So they were all part of that black migration from the south to the north. So yeah, we didn't have much money, but we were a pretty solid family. Growing up, there was always something competitive to do in the schoolyard or in the neighborhood, from shooting tops on the street, hopscotch, you name it. We used to play stickball in the street, football in the street. Or in the schoolyard playing baseball, basketball, something all the time. So you grow up with a kind of a competitive spirit that, if I want to play, we used to have something called the chunk rule. I don't know if you do this, if they did that in your neighborhood, Richard. But suppose there was 10 guys playing, and all of a sudden a guy walked up who was pretty good. And whoever was the worst guy, he got chunked. You had to go sit down and we bring the other guy in. Well, that was pretty embarrassing to get chunked, so you didn't want that to happen to you. So how would you avoid that? You just had to play harder. You had to play tougher. You had to be better. I mean, it was the goal of mine. We used to shoot free throws to see who picked first, to be the first pick. I mean, that kind of validated that you had done the work to be one of the better players. So
I think that I want to go back to you talking about your parents. And you talk about foundation, because you talked about your mother working in that sweatshop.
Yes.
And as you shared about your mom working in that sweatshop, I remember as a child that my mother kind of told me stories, and then I did the little 2-week summer down south, where my mother talked about picking cotton and tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if anybody knows, when you picked cotton, you had a bag and you had to get so many
fill it.
So there was a work ethic that was established from the very beginning.
Yes.
And would you say, based on the foundation that your mom and your father had, or it don't necessarily have to be a mother and a father, it could have been an uncle, it could have been a cousin, it could have been a neighbor. Back then, we had what we called a work ethic.
Yes.
So, based on your experience now, how do you see, especially our work ethic, and especially I'm going to hit young people first?
Okay. For me, right, I saw my parents go to work every day, so it was kind of isn't that what you do? That's kind of what's expected. And because I'm a child, we never went hungry. We didn't have much. We had one car, and there's no garage. I mean, this is a townhouse in North Philly, so this is no big row house. I shouldn't even say townhouse. Sounds too fancy. So the idea that you just got to grind it out sometimes. You mentioned politics earlier. Well, politically, those types of jobs like my mother had got shipped overseas. So, the black neighborhoods that would have fulfilled those jobs, when politically it became expedient for wealthy people to ship those jobs overseas, that's what left the black community in a tough space. So I think for a lot of black people, those manufacturing jobs, those jobs that did not require a college degree, went elsewhere. So what else were you supposed to do? It was kind of determined for me because of my parents' background. Oh, you've got to go to school, you've got to get an education, you've got to go to college. That still is a step forward. But we're at a time now where it doesn't have to be college. I mean, the world is complicated enough that if you are a plumber, carpenter, engineer of any kind, computer guy, you don't have to have a college degree to justify that. You need to just go out and get something started. Dock workers are now making upwards of almost $100,000 a year. So it doesn't matter. You have to put that. One of the things that we talk about as a coach is that on a daily basis, you try to get 1% better. That comes from a book. I think the guy's name is James Clear, wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And that book had an important impact on me, retrospectively looking at my life, and then forward thinking to the people that I'm talking to now. And it just says you just have to try to be 1% better every day. And if asked, can you accomplish 1% better every day? Most people will say, yeah. But it's not the 1%. It's the everyday part is the one that really compounds it. So you have to make that commitment every day, establish those habits. And work is one of them. Get your spiritual self together is another one. Be a voice in your community. I think, and somehow, although we have all these computers and everything, that's actually, I think, kind of isolating people. Because how many people do you see walk around with their phone in front of their face? And instead of talking to Richard, I would text him. Well, it's nice to meet people face to face. I think we're losing a little bit of that with all the technology that we have.
I'm because you're a coach, and sometimes people don't understand the responsibility of a coach. So could you share to the audience the responsibility of a coach, because you have the ability to influence or chart somebody's life. Mm-hmm. And people don't understand that sometimes. And also, I'd like you to talk about that, but also your coaching experience to adapt to not just athletes, but those all around.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a coach, let's just use the current team I have now. We just went through tryouts, which is a trying period for a coach because you have to cut some kids and there's some tears and everything like that. But anyway, we get down to our 10 players that we have. Well, I'm going to be responsible for those 10 people for the next 3 months, pretty much on a daily basis, 6 days a week. And we're going to interface with each other. There's plans that I have for them. There's things and goals that they need to achieve. And we have to build those things together over the next 3 months. Our team last year went 15-1 in our division, so we've had success at Central Dauphin. And team building, it's not so much about the basketball as it is about the team building. That we have to have people that will learn to trust each other, who accept each other as teammates and brothers for that period of time. And then they have to have academic standards. So we stress that all the time, that if I'm going to invest all this time in you, you have to invest some time in making sure that you have good grades. You have to invest that you're going to be a better person around the school, that you're going to be one of the people that the other teacher says, little Johnny is so much better since he's been on the basketball team. So we can have that kind of positive success on them. For our kids, when it's a game day, we put them in shirt and tie. They have to dress up in a shirt and tie that day. And it says, well, why would you do that? Well, the reason we do that, or I do that, I ask that of them, is that when you put that shirt and tie on that morning, you knew, hey, I've got something important to do today. And that I've prepared myself for this, that we've practiced hard, and now we're about to demonstrate that we can play well against this other team. And if we do the things well that we've practiced, then we probably should win. But if we don't win, if we lose, then there's lessons to be learned. That's exactly what was going to be our practice plan for the following week. What things happened in that game that we did not do well? What things happened in that game that we did do well? And then it's a question of the old adage, you want to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. So doesn't that really apply to almost any situation you're in? So
you're right,
Yeah.
and that's why I want to carry it a little step further. You're right about that, but we don't have enough coaches. And when I say we don't have enough coaches, don't have to be a sports coach. It could be a coach. I see too often, especially in our neighborhoods, where kids are told they're not going to be anything.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are told they can't reach that higher level academically. And so there has to be a cheerleader there. And that's why I think it's important that we, and when I say we, I mean those around us in the community, have a responsibility, because everybody don't have fathers.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody don't have mothers. Everybody don't live in a house. We got a lot of transit. We got a lot of homeless. And a lot of times, all those kids want is just somebody to say, how you doing? Or somebody to look like you know they exist.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is that team building and that responsibility about something. I find that is a platform that is the responsibility of all coaches. And I want to clarify something. I'm not just, when I use the word coach here today, I'm not just talking about some athletic coach with a person with a whistle.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I'm talking about. We all could be coaches to all the young people, no matter what they do. And that's what we're lacking. So we're lacking that. And whose fault is that? Is that our fault? Because what is happening is, if our kids can't read, it's our fault. If our kids don't know no history, it's our fault. But we have a tendency to want to blame somebody else or accuse somebody else of us not doing our job.
Mm-hmm.
So, if from your life experience, what are some of the things you think we should do as a people?
That part goes to when I was a classroom teacher, more so than as a coach. See, as a coach, you do, and especially in case of basketball. But I've coached, like I said, I've coached varsity tennis, golf, and basketball. So you get to select your audience. You get to select your team. When you're a classroom teacher, you don't do that. You have to teach the people who are in front of you. So that part is where I said that statement earlier. A lot of times when I'm teaching, I'm coaching. That I am coaching up those kids as well. That one of the things you mentioned, Richard, through our mutual friend, would know that I put my money where my mouth is. I actually went in because I'm in the school. I actually substituted in the school last year. And I was a long-term sub for a sixth grade classroom, so I had pretty much the same kids for a couple months. And I was shocked at their lack of curiosity. I guess that's the kind of the best term to use. And kind of one of the things you're kind of grasping at here, why isn't there more curiosity? And I think we are victims of this technology age where it's all about texting, it's all about social media, it's all about other things that aren't so important or vital. So that was my subject, was history. I taught social studies. I taught world history. I've taught U.S. history. So I asked kind of a geography question. Do you realize you're on a planet that's moving? You're moving at 18 miles a second right now? And it was like, duh. Well, so what? Well, that question, when I first heard some information like that, prompted a lot of questions in my mind. And then once you have a question that starts learning, then that will continue, fall like a set of dominoes. So for our community right now, where's the beginning of that set of dominoes? What's something that sparks that curiosity that they need to know about ourselves, about each other? Uh, there's a tremendous history that even when I went to one of the top high schools in Philadelphia at the time, they never said anything about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street and those kinds of things. So we're at a point right now where if I was to predict, given the current political climate, there needs to be another push like that. We need another Black Wall Street. We need several Black Wall Streets in all the communities across this country. Most dollars are the black neighborhoods generate a lot of income, but we don't spend a lot of that income on ourselves. It kind of goes outward. So one of the things you mentioned in your intro and in our discussion, that's where our awareness has to pick up. That there's a lot more that needs to be done to focus on what we can do for each other. In America, we tend to think that there is a political solution for a lot of the things going on. And as a political scientist, I would say that's not exactly correct. You really can't depend on the government. The government in this case is not going to be friendly based on who's in office right now. So that means you just got to really bear down and understand what is it that's happening. What can we do as a community to gird ourselves? The last time somebody talked about tariffs in this manner, strangely enough, it was the Hawley Smoot tariff in 1928 or 29. Forgive me if I got the date wrong, but it preceded the Great Depression. So with Trump talking about all these tariffs and things like that, and there's going to be inflated prices, there's a whole cycle about to begin that could precede a recession or depression. So how are we going to survive that? What are you going to do to survive that? So how do you get that message? Because that certainly isn't being taught in grade school. It's not being taught in any middle school or high school that I know about. And the kids are not motivated about it because parents have not been motivated about it. It has to come, that question has to be asked and answered somewhere. Where is, I guess, is a good place maybe for our conversation to steer it.
Well, I think that I've always believed that economic progress, I've always felt that we need to develop ownership. We needed to look at our communities, regardless of whatever community, you need to look at the community and build from within that community. And I think maybe this might be the shot in the arm that's going to force us to do that. And not only force us to do that, but I think we have to now rely on each other to develop our communities and support our communities and do the right things in our communities. And when I say that, that means law and order.
Mm-hmm.
That means clean streets. And it also means love and support. I'm a believer that I think that young people, they should, when they see older people, especially a lot of older people that are lonely and don't have anybody, it's okay to say hello. Yeah. It's okay to say good morning. It's okay to say how you doing. But I'll reverse that, and it's okay for older people to see young people and smile and say good day to them or have a good day, because the problem is the structure of what we believe. That's why I have this program, because I had came into the studio earlier and I had my little hat on and I had a little black vest on and everything, and the person said, well, somebody was thinking that you was getting ready to carjack or something. because that was what the image is what created about us. I've walked down the street and people have clutched their pocketbook because they thought I was going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say that it's important. It's very important for us to define who we are. Because nobody knows who we are. Everybody thinks we either basketball players or football players, and all of us can't be basketball players, all of us can't be football players or whatever. But we can be a lot of other things, but we can be good at it. And that's one of the things that you had said earlier was that trade schools. We don't
Yes.
talk about trade schools. Trade schools, hey, I can tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, you might want to consider a trade school or a trade because you might be more, you might have a lot more money than those who's going to college. They
Right.
got to pay those loans. But you know the problem is we don't encourage it. I rarely hear people talk about we need to now start to learn to get those trades because we don't talk about it. Because we keep waiting on somebody to come through and help us. That's why I have people like you or different people so people can see exposure. If you're not exposed, you have no way of knowing what you can do or what you can't do because you never looked outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to my audience if I say, I'll throw out there, they need to look outside the box? Coach
Okay.
and teacher.
And teacher. First of all, exactly, I think vocational education has kind of fallen sideways. We were becoming so academically oriented, so how many philosophy majors do you really need? I mean, how many sociologists do you really need? Those types of things. But I know I need an electrician, I know I need a plumber, and I know I need people who know how to do computers. I know I need people who can accomplish those kinds of tasks, and those are where the future jobs are, and they all pay well. I think there's still some stereotype that vocational education we're gonna look down on that. No, in fact, isn't that what a part of what our political climate is now? Is that there's these smart people, rich people look down on everybody else? Well, I don't see it like that. A good day's work is a good day's work. You still make the same money I do. We still spend it in the same grocery stores, in Costco, or wherever you're going to go spend your money. It's not all about just going to college. College is fine. I mean, I've profited from that experience, and I would not trade that experience. But at the same time, if I had gone on to become an electrical engineer or something like that, there's plenty of opportunity there. And I think that the other field that's just screaming for people to go into is the medical field. So at some point, I'm 72 years old now. At some point, everybody is going to need some kind of medical care. That's inevitable. If you live long enough, you're going to still need some kind of medical care. So that is a whole job market that is not going away, and then it's begging for people to go into it. So that kind of training, that kind of exposure is exactly what I think people need to follow. We have enough, like I said, philosophy majors. I'm sure there's a lot of talking heads on TV that can talk about those kinds of things. But when it comes down to the day-to-day, what are you going to do to feed your family? What are you going to do to provide for your kids? Are you going to have a better legacy for your kids than what they had? I guess that was the part of the point of my parents, was that they wanted something better for me, and you want to pass that down. The standard of education, though, in middle and high school has to be there so that you can see that there's a vocational end that could possibly be there for you.
Since you brought up the schools, how do you see our educational institutions at this point in time? And number one, and two, what do you think that we should do to help make education more accountable? And
Very, very good. Yeah, a couple things on that.
sure.
The problem with education, and as a teacher, they are squeezing teachers really hard. Like the teachers are overwhelmed with the number of tasks that you have to accomplish on a daily basis. So let's say, for example, if you're an executive in a company, excuse me, and you had to supervise 120 employees, and you had to make sure that those 120 employees were given information on a daily basis, and that you had to account for their accumulation and testing that they get the information. Well, that's what a teacher is required to do, and that level of scrutiny and that level of expertise would be greatly enhanced if we start lowering class sizes. So, for example, I taught, when I first moved here, I taught in Campbell High School. Those not familiar with that area, it's a smaller school district in this area. When I was teaching
And
there,
economically a little bit.
yes, and it's they have money there. So my original class sizes were 17, 18 kids in a class, which is equivalent to pretty much what you would have in a private school. So when you send your kids to private school, the teacher to pupil ratio is like 1 to 10, 1 to 12, something like that. To have a public school at that time in which the ratio was about 1 to 18, 1 to 20, since then, when teachers retire or something like that, they don't hire another teacher to replace them. They just divvy it up a little bit, and then you get higher class sizes. Well, with a higher class size, now I'm responsible at a 1 to 25 ratio. You literally are divided into that smaller piece. You're not going to be as an effective a teacher as you were when it was 20. And now we're up to class sizes. I know, especially in some of the black neighborhoods where it's 1 to 30. Mm-hmm. Well, every kid beyond 21, 22 is a multiple. It's like that kid is an extra kid beyond that. At a time where, as you indicated earlier, we're at a time where people need that coach. They need that other influence. They need that other handout just to say, hi, Richard, how you doing, man? How's that homework going? Is there anything I can do to help you? That they need to know that there's a helping hand there. Well, if there's 25 helping hands, it's hard to shake 25 hands. If there's 31 to 35 helping hands that need help, then it's even your effectiveness is reduced even more. So one of the things I would say, if you're sitting at home, can you figure out a way to volunteer in school? Is there somewhere that you've had some college experience or you have some work experience that you could share? See if you can volunteer in one of the public schools. I know there's some hoops you have to go through because there's clearances, there's FBI clearances. Like the coach, you have to have an FBI clearance and you have to have this clearance and child abuse clearance and all those kinds of things. Absolutely. You should not be able to just wander into school and have anybody walking in there. But once you do that, you will see that there is a desperate need part of what you're describing, where a kid that is not a kid, in my cases, kids that didn't make the team, I still reach out to them and try to encourage them to keep going with your basketball. Keep your grades up because you're going to need those. Just keep going. Now, don't let my decision that you didn't make the team be the thing that stops you from being a better person. So that would be the first thing I would say to help fix the education system, is that we need more teachers or somehow reduce the class size. In some cases, that means you need to build more schools. At a time here's where people that didn't pay attention during this last political exercise, the Trump administration says they want to eliminate the Department of Education. So they are seeking to cause chaos. And it's up to our communities to kind of gird together and make sure that kind of damage doesn't happen. We are not going to be able to depend on federal aid because that's not going to come. So we got to get here locally. I think that would be the other message that I would give, that local involvement, be involved in your own community. the old thing, it takes a village to raise a child, is going to be even more important right now.
I know a lot of times parents, they flip out when it comes to school and sports. How do we get parents to not flip out in terms of, but step up to make sure that our kids can read and write? Because I just looked at some statistics, and even I just saw something in the paper the other day on about the reading level
It's not
of our
good.
kids. If you can't read and you can't write, just please tell me, teacher, how you gonna function?
Yes. I would say that you would think that reading would be encouraged, but it's not, because they can just say things and do things on their phone. Like, again, part of the technology has kind of poisoned that ability to read and communicate, because now like, for example, I had a girl in my class who's trying to sneak, she has the phone thing down there. So what do you think you're doing over there? Well, I'm just checking my Instagram because I put up a TikTok, or I say I'm not even familiar with it. Well, what do you think you're going to be some kind of influencer? What do you think you're doing in 6th grade that's going to be so important that literally millions of people want to find out what that is? And that's kind of a little bit unrealistic. So I think our this younger generation has been kind of given this illusion that it's much easier than it really is. In terms of reading, I guess if I was going to point out that why I was a successful student, I did read a lot. I was famous for hiding a comic book inside the textbook and reading that. So my mother didn't discourage that. She'd actually would buy me comic books with the idea, well, at least you're reading something, So another fond memory. The ability to read and write is always valuable. That's the method of communication that we need. I'm trying to get back to answering your specific question. As a coach, as a teacher, you've got to find something that you're curious about. For example, one of the things I like to do now is garden. Well, if you're going to start gardening, what do you need to know? Well, what kind of plants is it? Where do you plant the seed? What kind of soil does it have to be in? What fertilizer do you need to use? How much sun does it have? It's one thing starts a whole series of questions. And now I'm into, you're into biology. You need to know the sequence of why things happen. You don't think that plants are alive and that, now I got to guard against squirrels. I got to put out this and that. So just that idea of starting one thing. Part of what I do as a coach is we lay out a series of goals that you need to accomplish. So where in school are those goals being laid out? I think we're watered down because of the student to teacher ratio. But so parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, challenge those kids. What is something that you do well? What is your superpower? Everybody has a superpower. Everybody has the ability to do things well. It's your God-given ability. So tap into it. You got to be prepared to let it come into your life. So,
but people have to ask them that.
You have to ask.
I mean,
yes.
People have to ask them that. Nobody asked them this thing. I mean, I see the kids all the time. They look like zombies. It's like life is tough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not naive and think that life is the same as when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I do understand that, but we gotta figure a way to give our kids hope. Now, I would admit to you that they got to learn how to read. If they don't know how to read and write, I don't know how they're going to function. Because as the world moves around, and I think everybody is seeing what's happening, we have to now develop our future leaders We got to develop. We have a. I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think we have a I think we have a responsibility. I think we have a responsibility to help develop our kids,
Yes.
because if we don't, shame on us.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that that's what talking about politics is going to be interesting because now we need to start taking control of the school boards. Who's on the school
Yes.
boards? What's the curriculum? Everybody else is talking about curriculum, but we don't talk about curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, now we don't talk about curriculum. Our kids don't know a whole lot, is what we got to do. We got to do a job. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just telling you. I don't think we got a choice anymore. We're going to have to step up to the plate. Because if we don't step up to the plate, our young people are going to be in trouble. See, it's not about you anymore. It's not about I anymore. It's about us now. Because we're going to have to pull together. We're going to have to reach back and pull up. And we're going to have to form together so that we can be positive. I want this conversation to end with you telling my audience what are some of the positive things that you think is our responsibility, and as a coach, as a teacher, how you see it.
Okay. There's been a couple things that personally I've discovered about myself and about the world that I think are true. So I'm going to try to kind of summarize that. Is that you shape the world you live in. It's your habits. You are the accumulation of your habits that you exist. So if your life is not exactly where you think it should be, you have the ability to change that. You have the ability to shape it to make it look like what you want it to look like. So what does that require? First, you have to do some self-examination, some self-analysis, and realize that you are the sum of the choices that you've made. So if you're not, say, oh, I'm poor. Well, you've made decisions like that if having money is a priority for you, what I say in coaching is you have to change identity to the person that you want to be. And well, what? Yeah, right. You have to change identity to the person you want to be. And then what are the habits that are associated with that? So obviously when I'm talking about basketball, oh, I want to be, the next Michael Jordan. Oh, that's great. All right. If you want to be Michael Jordan, you have to get into that identity. What were his habits that you could duplicate if that's your goal, if that's what you want to be? If you want to be a musician, you have musical talent. I want to get to that identity. So what are the habits of a person who's a musician? That means they practice, they study music, they listen to all kinds of genres, they're into it. You have to find that thing that you're into and then pursue those goals. And I think that would be the main thing that I would say to somebody is there's a path for you. God's path. God has a path. He has a divine plan for all of us. So how do you key into it? Where do you find it? And I think you ask yourself. One of the things that we talk about, that we actually do sometimes, we actually sit back and meditate for a while. We actually say, all right, everybody, close your eyes, do some breathing, and just be quiet for a minute. And see what answers come, see what questions pop up. And then that's what's telling you. You depend on that internal intuition to tell you what you're supposed to be doing. It's like and then part of it is like the old Spike movie title, Do the Right Thing. We have that, it used to be the comics where you had a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. Well, stop listening to that devil part over there and listen to the angel part. Do the right thing. So I would summarize it like that.
Okay, so you would summarize it like that. As I would say to the audience, we have a responsibility. All of us have a responsibility to develop our community, develop our economic structure, And we have the ability, and we're going to have the ability, we're going to sit at the table. And we want a piece of the action at the table. And it's time for people to stop taking us for granted. But as I say that, it's time for us to be serious as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave you with the song I came in with. Mary, Don't You Weep. Because the election's over and we got to move forward.